Tonight, our next guest has uncovered the fascinating story of an Irish woman whose bravery during World War II deserves to be much more widely known.
That remarkable story is now subject of a brand new book. We're delighted to welcome author Cathi Fleming. Good morning, Cathi. It's lovely to have you here.
Lovely to be invited.
So can you tell us about Sister Kate?
Well, Sister Kate was born in Drimoleague. She was the eldest of 9 siblings to Daniel and Mary. And she had a lovely childhood. When she was 18, she joined the Franciscan Sisters of Calais. So she went to Cork City to join. And from there, she was sent to France to nurse in a little town called Bethune. So she nursed during World War I up until 1918. And her health began to deteriorate. So she was asked to come to Louisiana and become a nurse there in a hospital. And she was asked by a fellow Corkonian called Sister Crowley. So she spent time there, and her escapades are in the book, and they're quite exciting. That chapter is called Nun with a Gun. And then her health deteriorated and she was sent back to France. And this was at the start of World War II. So she set up a resistance group with 2 other ladies, 2 French ladies, Sylvette and Angela.
And okay, talk to us about the resistance group that she set up in World War II. What was she doing?
Basically, it was one of the fledgling resistance groups, so it wasn't very organised. Their job, she had a pass from the German Reich to visit a POW camp. So she was a nun, she was a lady, she had a pass and she could speak English and French. So she could talk to the English soldiers and she could get them to formulate a plan. And then Sylvette ran a garage, so she had the car. Angela had a cafe, so she could hide them upstairs while the Germans were downstairs drinking wine or beer.
And these are prisoners of war that they were...
prisoners of war. These would have been English soldiers, possibly French soldiers. A lot of them would have been lads that were trying to hold the German troops back while the others got to Dunkirk.
Okay, so this was all happening in France?
Very, very early on, in 1940.
In 1940, they kind of set all this up?
Yes, they did.
So as we're going, obviously with 1930, with everything that was happening with the Vichy government, with the Germans coming in and overrunning France, the resistance was so important.
Absolutely.
In France. Was she doing this as part of her sisterhood, or was this very much with her mates being like, I'm not putting up with this?
That's a very good question. She had a huge decision to make.
Yeah.
Will I stand by and let history play out, or will I say no to tyranny? And she had already nursed during World War I, so she saw what was happening with the invading forces. And she said, I'm going to say no, I'm going to stand up. I don't think her convent, certainly the Mother Superior didn't know. There's evidence that her chaplain, Canon Bouchind, who had been active in the resistance in World War I. So he supported her, and through the book, the reader follows her journey, which is quite remarkable, in her footsteps. So every day what she did could have had her shot, easily.
It was incredibly risky. What led to her being then arrested and sent to Ravensbruck?
Yeah.
The Nun of Ravensbruck is the name of the book. But what led, and tell us a little bit more about Ravensbruck.
So Tommy, she was arrested on the 18th of June 1940. De Gaulle spoke and invited everybody to resist. They were already resisting at that stage. They started in May. So 1 year later, I think because they amalgamated in November with a big organisation in Paris, they might have become a little bit lax in being aware of the Gestapo. The net was closing.
Okay.
The guy that really sort of rumbled their group was a young 17-year-old, barely 18, called René. He was their runner. He would liaise between the Paris group and the little group in Bethune. He was captured and he was told 1,000,000 times by the leader in Paris, memorize dates, memorize addresses, but didn't he have an address book in his pocket? Which led them to Sister Kate. And she was arrested on the 18th of June, 1 year after de Gaulle had called for resistance. She was put into solitary confinement. She didn't know. Her worst fears was, will I be brought before the Gestapo? Will I implicate anybody? So that was a pivotal moment for me in her bravery. And she had 5 interrogations with the Gestapo.
Ravensbruck itself, it's about 180 kilometres north of Berlin. So it was a concentration camp for women. So whom would she have been there with? Would there be an awful lot of Jewish women who had been captured, or was it various resistance fighters?
Very good question. By the time Sister Kate arrived, after 3 years of going from camp to camp, she arrived in November. There would have been 120,000 women and children walked through those gates through the lifetime of the camp. There was a huge tent set up in the main square, and that was full of Jewish refugees who had been taken from Auschwitz, because this was 1944. You and I would know now that the war was coming to an end. But the Germans were, well, the Nazis, I shouldn't say Germans because they were good Germans. The Nazis were still gassing people in various camps. But the gas chamber in Ravensbruck was set up in January, and she survived a selection for that.
It was set up in January of 1944?
January 45.
45?
So close to liberation. And they just really, Himmler just said the numbers that are dying are not high enough. We want, ramp it up, lads, ramp it up.
And it was a female-only concentration camp, was it? Look, why do more people not know about this?
Now, there was a camp, Tommy, near it for men, but the women never saw those men. And they had about, in total, 20,000 over the lifetime. So primarily it was a camp for women and children. And the reason we didn't know much about it was because after the war, it became part of the Russian sector. So until the 1990s, when Germany had amalgamated.
The Berlin Wall fell down, the reunification of Germany.
Then we found out about it.
I'm assuming as you mentioned there, you're talking about Heinrich Himmler setting up a gas chamber in 1945 when they knew it was coming to an end. She was in a concentration camp.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
assuming that the conditions were just horrendous.
They were. Very little food. At that stage, when she arrived in November of 44, the toilet blocks were broken. The food, you had little children, gypsy children, running around, knocking over barrels of containers, vats of soup and lapping it up. They were so starved. And she was expected to do a 12-hour, 13-hour day's work in maybe minus 20 degrees in the winter, digging sand. So there were the sand workers, the bog workers. It was horrific. But the block that she was in the far right-hand corner, block 32. The women in that block looked after each other. Friendship and loyalty was everything. One woman wrote later on in a witness statement, she said, if you were on your own in a camp, if you kept yourself to yourself, you wouldn't survive. You needed your fellow sisters, and I say that loosely. Yeah. You needed the love and affection of the other women in the block.
Yeah, but then you're talking about her being solitary confined, like the most horrendous conditions. She eventually got to move back to Cork.
She did, yeah.
How did all those, how did it affect her?
That's a good question. I think, according to her family and to other nuns that I have interviewed who have come to see her in Cork, she became very quiet. She was very, very quiet. She also suffered from swollen legs, which is a sign of oedema, that her heart was affected. But she really, her longing to get back to Cork and her family, and her role as a nun in Hole and Home, that kept her going. And she came back. She recovered with her brother first in England, who was a doctor, Dr. Dan, and then with another brother in Tipperary. And she went back to Cork and she took over the running of Hole and Home, which was for elderly gentlemen on hard times. She was innovative. She asked that they build apartment blocks for elderly gentlemen so they could have their wives with them. Like, that's amazing. And she just took over, and she was so happy to be home.
The book is extraordinary.
Thank you.
The things that Sister Kate did. Like a very dangerous life this woman decided to leave. We're seeing a lot of echoes through time right now about what happened during World War II. You only discovered her because of a line.
That's right.
Like she kind of could have been lost to time, but you did get to speak to some people who knew her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would like to consider myself very friendly with her niece, Sister Breda, who remembers her. Sister Breda would have been about 4 when she came back to Tipperary, and she remembers bringing a little footstool to Auntie Katie because her legs were so sore. Yeah. I remember another niece speaking that Sister Kate just said, yes, I remember Berlin and walking in the snow in my bare feet. So that would have been on the way to Ravensbruck. So little snippets came out like that, and I have doctor's certificates that said she had to take to the bed because her heart was weak. So she was still a fighter, and she had a wicked sense of humour, as did all the women in the camp. Like, there was a lady in her barracks who was so important, Germaine Tillion. She wrote a musical, an opera, hiding in the attic, and the women never betrayed her. And there was one line from it when she said, Terence McSweeney died of hunger. I wonder how long we will live. And I'm going, how did she know about Terence McSweeney? Could Sister Kate have told her?
Yeah.
Like the level of research that must have gone into this, because I know she only did one interview, but talking to family and people, records, as you say, going through that. In terms of the example that she led, in the current climate, what's going on, what's the one message maybe that she would teach us about the present?
Okay, I think she would say, remain true. To thine own self be true, because she was true to her values, and her core value was, I will never turn a sick person away. So I think if you or I have a belief, we remain true to it, and heroes or heroines aren't made by the grand gestures, they're made by little things, small little things, and that's what she did. And in today's climate, be kind to each other, stand up for what you believe, don't agree with those who are shouting and roaring. Believe in what you believe, and that's what she did. And she carried that with her all her life.
I'll follow you into battle if you want, Cathy, as well, by the way. I'll tell you that much.
I'm signing up.
I'm not even joking. I'm like, yeah, keep on going. The book is called The Nun of Ravensbruck. This is about Sister Kate from County Cork, and Cathi Fleming is telling her story. It's a pleasure having you here, Cathy.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful work.
Wonderful question.
Congratulations.
Thank you
so much.
Well done. Thank you.
Right now, it's time to go to the Virgin Media Newsroom. Here is Geraldine Lina.